Okay, welcome everybody. It's such a beautiful turnout. So nice to see everyone again. So this week is Parshas Vayakhel, which means, Moshe gathered the Jewish people in order to tell them again the instructions for the Mishkan. And as you know, I was preparing this class, I was thinking it's kind of a nondescript Parsha. I mean, you can't say any Parsha is nondescript or any Parsha is not important, but it's kind of like a repeat. We already did this in Parshas Teruma, where God commanded us to make the Mishkan, and it tells us about all the different particulars and all the different materials and things that would be used for the Mishkan. And now it's just repeating it again. And it's very interesting because when it comes to the giving of the Torah, Matan Torah, which was like such a miraculous, eventful, stupendous event, the Torah writes it, and it's written in just, a few passages. But when it comes to the Mishkan, the building of the Mishkan, the building of the tabernacle, it goes into the details, and the details, and the details. And then it repeats it again. 2 Parshias later, we have the Parsha Teruma Tetzava. One is about the Mishkan, one is about the clothing of the Kohanim. Then we have Kisisa, where we have the Egel, where the Jewish people did the golden calf. And now we have Vayakhel, and again next week, which is Pekudei, which are usually read together, where it's again the repetition of the Mishkan, how it was built. And then the Pekudei is about the different vestments that were worn by the Kohanim. And it's like, okay, again, we're hearing it again. And I'm thinking, okay, there's always beautiful things to say on every weekly Torah portion, and there's so many things that you could find within the weekly Torah portion that are always inspiring. There's plenty to say. But then as I'm driving here, I'm thinking, maybe actually this is one of the most important parts of the Torah. And I'll tell you why. Not only because it's about the Mishkan, where we're making a home for God, which is, of course, this is our whole job in this world. Every one of us. It's v'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'sochem. God says, make me a home, make me a place, make me a holy place, and I'm going to live in you. Not in the Mishkan, but in you. Meaning God is living within each of us. Everywhere that we go, we're making a home for God. We're making a habitat for God. We're making God comfortable where we are. So that's stupendous enough. That's a reason enough for it to be such an important parsha. But there's more to it. And that's what I was realizing as I'm driving here. And the thing that I feel is the most important about this week's parsha is that it's teaching us how to really go through life. We all have ideals. And we all think, okay, this is how things are going to be. And that's what we heard about how the Mishkan is supposed to be. You should build it this way, and you should build it this way, and it was the command of how to do it. And then what happens? The Egel, the golden calf. We mess up. We make a mistake. There's problems in life. We all encounter the difficulties, the challenges, the hardships, the struggles, life. And I think as we came in before, everyone was kind of saying how this has been a week for a lot of us, right? So this is the week where we've been through that week, or that year, or whatever it is. And you're feeling just so like you can't anymore. And then comes Vayakhel, and it tells us, hold on, get right back up. You slipped, you fell, you had life happening, the issues of life. Now it's time to get right back up and to actually do it, to actually build it. So the Egel was there. The golden calf, which we said was the most difficult, the most horrific sin that the Jewish people committed, because it was right after we got the Torah and we messed up. And life happens, whether it happens to us or whether we make it happen, but life happens. And then this week's portion comes and says, you know what? Time to get right back up and get back into it. Build. And how do we build? Vayakhel. Moshe gathered all of us. When hardships, when challenges, when difficulties happen, we gather together. We need to gather together as a group. And that's why when we sit Shiva, it's so important that we have people all around us, that we have those people, the comfort of people around us. When we go through hardships, we need to have that comfort of the group, but then we have to get right back up and go ahead and do it. And that's what this week's Parsha is about. And that's why it's so important to say all the particulars of this Parsha. And they did this, and they did this, and they did this, and they did every single part of the Mishkan. But we already had that, like 2 weeks ago. Why don't you just say, and they did it all. Moshe commanded them to do this and this and this and this. And then this week's Parsha should be, and they did it. But no, because it's not so simple, and they did it. When we're going through those challenges, every single step is a challenge. Every single effort that we put in is a hardship. It's difficult. So you're making the menorah, that's hard. And then you're making the shulchan, and that's hard. And you're making all the different parts of life. You're building all the different parts of life, and it's hard to get up because you just fell. Or you just had something, you were just blindsided by something, or some tragedy happened, and you just feel so deflated. And then the Torah tells us, yeah, that's life. Now get right back up. And each thing is acknowledged. Each part is acknowledged, because each part is difficult to do.
Is this not what we're going through?
This is exactly.
Yes, like every week since the Milchama.
Exactly.
It has spoken to us, and it's just so clear.
And that's what I'm thinking.
And I think when they write that Torahs are being written and giving to the soldiers in Gaza, we are taking over the land.
Yes.
That's it. We are taking over the land. I'm sorry.
Yes. No, and that only hit me as I'm driving here. Like, I prepared a whole thing to say, and then I'm thinking, like, hold on, this is what we're all going through in our personal lives, in our communal lives, and in our lives as the Jewish people. We're all going through that. And that's why every part is acknowledged. Every single step is acknowledged. And you might say, well, hold on. The ideal that Moshe spoke about in Truma, that's like an ideal. But now it's reality. And I can't. That ideal of what he said, how to build it, and what to build, and how to build it, the ideals of what we're supposed to do, that was there. But we're a different person now. We're like different people. We're sinners now. We've just gone through what we've gone through. Or we're people who have gone through tragedy now, and we're deflated. We can't. And that's why it says, no, you can do it. You can do it one step at a time, one thing at a time, one building at a time, but you can do it. And not only can you do it, but vayakhel, every single person is needed in this. So just like the Mishkan, when it didn't have one of the parts, one of the particulars of the Mishkan, one of the different furnishings of the Mishkan, it wasn't complete. The building wasn't complete. The home for God was not complete. So similarly, when we do something, we have to do it all together. Every single one of us is important in doing it. And that's why it says as well that the kind of materials that were used, it wasn't all gold, which gold represents the tzaddik, the highest level, the purest level. It wasn't all gold. It wasn't only silver, gold and silver, which silver represents a yearning, kesef. It means you're yearning for something, which is the Baal Teshuvah. It wasn't just someone who was the tzaddik, always completely pure, always righteous, or the Baal Teshuvah, somebody who failed but got back up. But it was also nechoshes, the copper, which represents the sinner. And it needed to be the sinner as well, because we're all parts of it. So we're not just talking about these holy people or these people who have learned their lessons in life. We're talking about the people who are failing right now. And you're needed. Because when we're failing as well, that is when we're needed. And that's why when we look at the word for tzibur, which is congregation. Tzibur? Tzibur. Thank you. I never pronounce it right.
I was thinking, what word did
what
you
is he
say?
saying? When we look at the word tzibur, it's made out of tzaddik, which represents a tzaddik, the righteous. It's made out of holy people. It's made out of the bet, which represents benoni, the average person, people who are good and not good and are kind of average in how we behave.
From Russia.
And it's made out of the Reish, which is the Russia, which is the sinners. And everyone is included. Rasha, yes. The sin, and that you cannot have tzibur without all of us together. And that's the beauty of being together. That's the beauty of the vayakhel, the coming together. I mentioned to some of you that, at my father's funeral, what was so special was that there was these great rabbis who were there. There was all different kinds of people from the community who were there, and from the wider Toronto community who weren't part of his congregation, who were there, who had been helped by him. And then there was also people who, I don't know how to call them, as someone called them misfits. It was kind of the people who didn't fit in. I didn't see anything at the funeral, so I can't even tell you who was there. I mean, I didn't see any of it, but this was what was told to me afterwards. She says, this was what they were expressing. It was so beautiful to see the different kinds of groups of people. There were the rabbis who you could see on their face that they lost one of their greatest colleague, their greatest rabbi. And then you could see, of course, the people in the congregation and the greater community who also felt such a loss. But then there were also these misfits, these people who didn't really fit in, who were socially a little not so much a part of any kind of group, who were crying as if they had lost a father. Because they did, because that's how he looked at them as a father, as someone. Because that's what Tzibur is. That's the ability of the congregation, how each and every one of us is so important and so necessary to be there. And that's what we see really in this week's Parsha vayakhel. The materials that are used, every individual thing that was used was elaborated on and expounded upon and was commanded before. And now when we actually make it, we're again reminded of it. But this idea of the need that when we fail, or when we are blindsided, or when we have gone through a tragedy, to get right back up and rebuild. And I wanted to share another story that was told from the Rebbe. It actually is a personal one because it relates to my father as well. This happened in 1957, and it's similar to what we're going through now. It was in the city of Kfar Chabad, and there was a terrible attack. There was a terrorist attack then. Now this was right at the end of the month of Nisan.
Was it Ramadan?
I think it was right before Independence Day. I don't know. There was this terrible attack, this terrible a random terrorist attack that they infiltrated the city of Kfar Chabad. Now the city of Kfar Chabad was made up of Hasidim who had immigrated from Russia. So these were like hefty Russian Hasidim who had withstood so much in Russia, and here they were building this town of Kfar Chabad. And the terrorist attack happened, that someone came in, a terrorist attack came in, and they went into the school where there were children, and it was during the prayers, the children were praying, and they just, shot around, and one teacher and I think 5 children were killed in that. And there was blood all over, you can imagine. I mean, it's similar, like one of these similar attacks, until they found the people, until they apprehended the terrorists, because there were orchards all around, and it was a primitive village. What did they have? There wasn't even, there was one phone maybe in the whole village at the time, and how, makeshift, guns to what did they have to defend themselves? It was very primitive. And the whole town, after that happened, they were broken. They said, maybe it's not our job right now to be building a village in our Holy Land. Maybe maybe we're just supposed to dismantle and that's it. And the whole morale was completely devastated. So what did they do? They wrote a telegram to the Lubavitcher Rebbe to ask, what should we do? The Rebbe was the one that encouraged them to make this village. So what should we do? And usually during the month of Nisan, the Rebbe was very much involved in spiritual activities, his own personal spiritual activities. There wasn't a lot of Farbrengens with Pesach and preparing and all that. And at the end of Nisan, he would make this big Farbrengen that would be kind of like for the next month of Iyar, and it was this big Farbrengen, and that would be like a very big celebration. And the news of what had happened in Israel came by telegram to the secretaries right before the Rebbe was supposed to go out for this Farbrengen. So the secretaries were thinking, like, let's just wait till after he finishes the Farbrengen. So they didn't tell him. But what they didn't tell him, he knew. Because the entire Farbrengen, he was crying. Usually it's a very happy Farbrengen. He was crying, and he was talking about Mesirat Nefesh, the self-sacrifice that we need to have for the land of Israel. And he was just, the whole thing was very, and everyone was wondering, why is the Rebbe weeping like that, crying like that? It was so unusual, and only the secretaries knew that this was because of what had happened, and the Rebbe obviously knew, even though they hadn't told him. The Rebbe finished the Farbrengen, and he went back into his office, and the secretaries came and they told him the news. And he then closeted himself in his office for the next 3 days, and there was no response. And meanwhile, in Israel, they were waiting for, like, did a letter come? What did the Rebbe say? What should we do? Like, some words of comfort, something. Nothing came for 3 days. Finally, after 3 days, there was an answer from the Rebbe, and it was this telegram, and it was only 3 words. And the 3 words were, Behemshach habinyan tinachamu. With continued building, you will be comforted. And suddenly, the Hasidim felt, okay, now we have a purpose. Now we have an understanding of what we have to do. With continued building, we will be comforted. This terrible tragedy that happened, okay, we thought maybe we should dismantle. We thought maybe we should give in to them, leave. No, we need to build. We need to continue building. And just exactly that day, the entire community got together, and the same place where there was that terrorist attack, they decided to build. The entire community, men, women, and children, were helping with the building. And that day they decided to create a vocational school for children who needed extra help with vocational activities. And that gave the Hasidim the purpose, that feeling of purpose, that this is what we're going to do. Now, about a little while after, the Rebbe sent actually a group of boys. It was 12, not boys, but men, young men, bacharim, young men, to go to Israel in order to in order to go around to all the various communities, because again, you can imagine the mood was still very somber and very feeling very low, to invigorate them, to give them strength, to give them chizuk. And he especially chose this group of 12 boys, and one of those men that he chose was actually my father.
Wow.
And it was and they stopped in communities along the way, and they spoke all over Israel. They were given, they were treated as if they were representatives of the Rebbe who were coming to really give life to the people of the land. And it was in that time when my father came that he actually met my mother.
That's right.
My uncle gave him a book from the Rebbe, a book of the Tanya, to give to my mother, and said, check him out. And it was there that they actually met. So there was this really big building that was happening as well on a personal level. But I mention this story because that is the Jewish attitude. You feel so low, you feel like everything has been taken away from you, you feel like the Jewish people have just committed the worst possible sin of the Egel. They feel like everything's so low, so like you don't know where to go, what to do. I mean, it's different if you're actually doing it, but it's really the same feeling, that feeling of desolation, desperation, just loneliness. You just can't go forward. And the lesson from that is, Behemshech habinyan tinachamu. You need to continue to pull yourself together, and with the pulling yourself together and the rebuilding, that is how you will find the comfort. And that is the message really in vayakhel. We've sinned, we've gotten to the lowest level, but vayakhel, we come together. We come together and we build, we go about in building this Mishkan, which is this beautiful home from God, together as we do it. And every person is so needed in this building. Every person is contributing to it. Some people gave a lot, some people gave less, it didn't matter. But every person needs to give something, and every person needs to be a part of it, because without your contribution, every person's contribution is so vital. And without one person's contribution, you can't have it. And that's like the Torah, like the Sefer Torah. When the Torah is missing one letter, right? One letter, it's not kosher. It could have thousands of letters, it doesn't matter. One letter is not there, one person is missing, that's not good enough.
And you know, sometimes the answers to these challenges that we have is just simple. You know, just simple to the point, not a big complicated answer or solution. It's just, he came up with the Rebbe came up with the exact right answer.
Right.
The simple answer.
Yeah. And often it's like really making people feel like they're needed, they're important. Like you need to do something, you need to build, you need to continue doing, but you and you and you and you, everyone was needed. And when you feel that you're needed, when you feel like you count, that you matter, that's exactly when you feel like, okay, maybe I can do it. Because otherwise you just feel like, who needs me? Like, what am I needed for anymore? Like, I'm sitting this one out, you know, and sitting this one out could be sitting the week out, the year out, the month out, you know, I'm out of this one. And it's, no, you're needed. You need to be a part of it. You need to take part, because every person is so necessary. At the Shloshim for my father, when a lot of the grandchildren spoke, and not a lot, but a few of the grandchildren spoke, and they shared different stories of how my father connected with them. And it was really so interesting to hear, because I didn't know some of these things. Like, I didn't know a lot of these things, how on an individual level he really connected. And one of my nephews said how my father called him up randomly, just randomly, and said to him, you know, your brother, your younger brother, I want you to encourage him. He used to do daf yomi. He used to learn every day one part of one page of the Talmud, and I want you to encourage him to do that. And my nephew was like astounded, like, calling me out of the blue to ask me about that, and like, why is he like worried about my brother learning daf yomi, and why is he telling me? So immediately he called his brother, and his brother said to him, actually, I had just decided, like, I'm sitting this one out. Like, I decided that the next group of learning, I'm going to stop, because different things were happening in his personal life. He wanted to take a break, and he resume again when they get on to the next chapter, or the next book. But he decided this chapter he was going to just take a break from it and take care of the many things that were happening in his life. And he says, but how did Saba, my father, know that? Like, I didn't tell him anything. You know, I didn't tell him that I was sitting this one out. I just figured I'll just sit this out. And so he called my father and he asked, how did you figure it out that I was just not doing it? I just started today. It was just the new one started today or the next day. How did you know that I didn't do it? And he said, I didn't know, but I felt it in my heart.
Wow.
And that just shows, like, you know, a grandfather feels in the heart when our contribution is not there. God looks at us and says, well, everyone, the tzaddik, the beis, the reish, everyone's needed to be the tzibur. We're all needed there. Everyone's needed as giving to make this home for God. Every person's contribution, whether it's big or small, whether it's gold or silver or copper, it doesn't really matter. But every person is needed there. Every person needs to be represented there. Now, at the beginning of the Parsha, it's interesting, Moshe talks about, right before he goes on to the efforts of the Mishkan, he talks about keeping Shabbos. He says 6 days you should keep the Shabbos and don't do any of the work. And then he goes on, sorry?
You mean the other way around? You said 6 days keep the Shabbat.
Oh, yeah, 6 days do you're right, thank you.
I'm like, all right.
Actually, that sounds kind of nice, no? That would be a good one. So he says, 6 days do your work, and 6 days your work shall be done. Ubayom hashvi'i Shabbos Lashem. It's a day of rest for Hashem. And then he goes on to say the different aspects of the Mishkan that would be done. And the lesson from that was that we do not do the work of the Mishkan on Shabbos. They were very busy building this Mishkan, this home for God, but everything stopped on Shabbos. Shabbos was not a day that would be used for building the Mishkan, but everything had to stop on Shabbos. It could not be desecrated in order to build the Mishkan. And from this we learn there's 39 different categories of work. They're called Lametes Malachos, 39 categories of work that we do not do on Shabbat. These are creative things that we stop doing on Shabbat because the energy of Shabbos is a divine energy of restfulness, whereas the energy of during the week is one of creating and changing the world. Whereas on Shabbos, God stopped and he says, I'm not creating anymore. I'm going to appreciate. I'm going to rest and appreciate what I have created. And we too, similarly, stop and do that. And those 39 prohibitions or categories of work that we do not do are specifically those that we're forbidden to do in the Mishkan. So some of it involves building, some of it involves selecting, and that's why even when you're selecting food on Shabbat, you can't take, if you have, for example, let's say a rotten cashew nut in that cup, which of course there's not, but you cannot take out the rotten one and leave the others. You have to take the good, you have to exactly, you have to take the good from the bad, the good ones from the bad. Coloring. I mean, these are all coloring, like painting, coloring, can't be done on Shabbat. There's 39 different categories. Weaving or braiding, sewing.
You want something hot?
Oh.
Rest for a second.
Yeah, I'll rest for a sec.
You want a hot drink?
Maybe.
Which
Thank
flavor?
you. Sorry?
Which flavor?
That doesn't matter.
Sugar?
No, nothing. Thank you.
I just want to make a comment based on the revelation that the Rebbe said about build and it will give you nechama, it will give you healing. I can't help but think that how many times we've had terror attacks in Israel. Big, small buses this way, in this yeshuv, in that city, in that location. Last week there was one outside of Ma'ale Adumim. I have many, many friends living there, and terrorists got out and mowed down people while they were sitting in traffic. Anyway, and then the next day, the government comes out and says, we're building in Efrat, we're building outside here, we're building here, we're building. Right away, that's the nechama. That has to be. And that was
true.
just in 3 words.
Yes,
Exactly what they're
what
doing.
you have to do, exactly.
Laura Lane, we shouldn't have to go through that, but that becomes our impetus to then move forward.
100%. I mean, you see this throughout Jewish history.
Right.
Like, this is what we do. This is how we do it. This is how we relate to tragedy, to difficulty, we just keep on going. Thank you. Okay. It's okay, I'm good. I'm good. Okay, now there's just, there's, take a break, yeah.
We'll talk amongst ourselves.
Yeah. We have no problem with that.
Thank you. Yes, thanks. There was just one other thing that I wanted to mention about this week's Torah portion, and that is the wash basins that we actually mentioned it 2 weeks ago. So, as soon as you came into the Mishkan, there was these wash basins that were made out of nechoshas, that were made out of copper. And these were actually given from the women. What were they used by from the women?
The mirrors.
These were the mirrors. These were the mirrors that the Jewish women in Egypt would use to make themselves look beautiful. And they would go to their husbands, even amongst when they were in servitude, and they would beautify themselves for their husbands. And this is how they got another generation of children to be born. Right? We spoke about that last time.
Yeah, when I said boobs.
So, when Moshe saw these mirrors that the Jewish woman wanted to give, he said, no, this isn't for the Mishkan. The Mishkan is a holy place. It's a place of God. And these things mirrors are items of vanity. This is what you use for vanity, to make yourself look pretty, to make yourself look nice. And God himself corrected Moshe. And he says, these are the most precious things that we can have. And these should be used in the Mishkan for the Kohanim to wash their hands. So when the Kohanim would come into the Mishkan, there would be this wash basin, this thing to wash that was made from the mirrors, and the Kohanim would wash their hands, and then they would proceed and go inside. Now what's interesting is that these wash basins were really the bridge. They were the bridge from the mundane world that the Kohanim were coming from, going into this temple, which is the place of total spirituality. It was the bridge that connected the everyday life, the mundane life that we all live, to this service in the temple of actually serving God in this holy spiritual service. And why was it this specifically that we used the mirrors that the woman gave? Because the mirrors that the woman gave were exactly that. They were taking mirrors that were used for mundanity, for frivolity, for beauty, for everything that Moshe thought doesn't belong in the temple. And they said, no, these are the things that we're going to use for holiness. Because Judaism does not look at a man and a woman's relationship, husband and wife relationship, as something mundane, as something even worse, as evil. Christianity does look at sexuality in a very negative light. Judaism looks at it as the holiest endeavor possible. So here you're taking the physical drive, very physical drive, you could say the lowest of the physical drives, that could be used for the greatest destruction, and you're saying, no, this is something that is the most beautiful. This is something that is actually the holiest. And that is why Judaism puts so much emphasis on husband and wife relationships, so much so that we're even allowed to take a Torah that belongs in a synagogue and sell it if a community doesn't have a mikveh. Because the mikveh is what enables the husband and wife to come together in holiness. Because the woman uses the mikveh after her period, and then the husband and wife unite in their sexual unity of intimacy. So Torah is saying that the holiest place, the holiest endeavor, is more holy even than the Torah, which is what the Jewish people throughout all these years, all the centuries, I mean, this Torah is what holds us up, right? Torah is what we jump into a burning building in order to save those Torahs. And it's telling us, no, you can actually sell those Torahs for something that's even more important. What? For husband and wife to be together. Because in Judaism, that is the holiest endeavor.
You know, my husband said that, and I swear I thought he was just being fresh. I couldn't believe it. I'm still in shock.
Wow, you learn something new every day. Yeah. And so therefore, this same wash basins were used on a similar idea. These were the things that were used, but the women would make themselves beautiful, not just for the sake of frivolity, not just for the sake of mundanity, but they did it for a positive reason of strengthening their husbands, of invigorating their husbands, of rejuvenating their husbands, and actually birthing the next generation of the Jewish people. And that, God says, is the holiest thing. Those are more precious to me than all the things that are in the temple. And an interesting point, these same wash basins were also used. We spoke about probably one or two times about the Isha Sota, the woman who was unfaithful. Isha Sota, the woman who was suspected of being unfaithful. And it says water was collected, and the water was collected actually from these wash basins. And the name of God was written, a pasuk from the Torah was written with the name of God, was put into these waters, and the name of God was erased. Because God said, I'd rather my name be erased for the sake of shalom bayis, for the sake of peace between husband and wife. That is how important peace between husband and wife is. So these same wash basins that were used by the women to beautify themselves is the same wash basins that the Kohen uses when he comes in from his world of mundanity, from his outside world, from his world of materiality and mundanity. As he enters into the temple, it reminds him that everything that we have in this world, everything that we use in this world, this is the bridge. Things can be used for holiness. We don't just look at things as something that can be used for holiness. I mean, of course, there are certain things that we stay away from, but most things in life have a way of being used. You can use it either for good or for bad, and it's our job to take it and to use it for holiness. And that was the message of these wash basins that the Jewish people used, that the Jewish woman gave for the Mishkan. So, this is basically this week's Torah portion. And the messages are very clear for us in how we need to bridge our own lives and how we need to bridge the mundanity of our own lives and say, okay, we're going to take the mundanity, we're going to take the materiality of this world, and now we're going to build from it the Mishkan. And even if we've gone through a tragedy, and even if we've gone through a mistake, and even if we've gone through a downfall, we need to remember that we're going to vayakhel. We're going to get together with others who can strengthen us. And once we are together with others and in the right environment where we can feel that strength, we're going to continue on and keep on building. Because it's only when we build, behemshich habinyan, when we keep on building, that we have tinachamu, that we feel our purpose, that we feel our meaning, and that ultimately we're comforted for everything that we need to go through. And that's the message for this week.
Thank you.